Hey, welcome back, everybody. You are listening to View from the Top podcast, where we help growth-minded men get through the valley and up the mountain to their very own view from the top. My name is Wally, and today's going to be a bit different. Y'all have heard Big A mention a few times just in recent months regarding some health concerns with a family member. And good news is some very helpful surgery took place just yesterday in Memphis, and Big A is there with his family and loving and serving them for the rest of this week. So, but at the same time, we didn't want to hold up getting some great content to you all this week. So I invited a trusted friend and mentor to me. His name is Curt Stowers, to join me on this episode. Really not for an interview per se, but more to really have a conversation around the challenges with our faulty mindset on setting big, hairy, audacious goals. Let's get Curt in here. Welcome, Curt.
Hey, Wally, glad to be here.
Hey, man, it's good to have you in for a convo today. I know about some things that we both are pretty passionate about. Curt, you and I have kind of both done that transition thing from W-2 to business owner over the years, and many of the guys listening today kind of know my journey. Would you share just a little bit with us, kind of your backstory a little bit before we dive into our topic today?
Sure, happy to do so. Mine's a bit of a strange one. My brother and I are the first ones in our family to go to college. So
Nice.
Both of our family was from the Central Illinois area, and still have family there. And so I was a math and science whiz in high school. Didn't really know much about college, but everybody told me I should go. So I ended up at Illinois in engineering. Had no clue that Illinois was a great school, much less a great engineering school. And from 7 to 3, I would do classes and ace the classes and do everything. And at 3 o'clock, I went and played basketball for 3 hours every day. So it was a ball, had a great time. For my senior year, got married to Sonia. Sonia and I got married back in 87. So
before your senior year.
Before
so you were
the
still in
senior
school.
year.
Okay.
Yep. Parents were happy to cut the cord at that point in time. They said, "Congratulations, no more checks." So I'm like, okay. Halfway through my first semester, the associate head of the department came to me and said, "How would you like to go to graduate school?" And I said, "What's that?" Here I'm at a major research university. Don't know what grad school is because I'm just having fun in class and playing basketball.
Yeah.
He said, "Well, we'll pay your tuition and fees second semester and pay you $1,000 a month to go to graduate school." I said, "Where do I sign?"
Sign me up.
Signed up for that. School was easy, so I stuck around and got a couple more degrees in industrial engineering with an emphasis on optimization theory. Like my numbers. And then Sonia and I joined Caterpillar after we graduated and began a whole nother journey. So for 20 years, we worked for Caterpillar, and we lived and traveled around the world. Had a chance to live in Central Illinois, in Denver, in Brussels, in Dubai. Had opportunities to work in marketing, had opportunities to work in purchasing, commercial management, operations, running operations. At one point in time, I was running the Europe, Africa, Middle East parts operations for Caterpillar. Got 3 kids, 31-year-old daughter, 28-year-old son, and 25-year-old daughter. And about 12 years ago, we came up here to Chicago, which is kind of interesting because I'd never lived in any place longer than 3 years of my life, pretty much. Been to 23 different places. And about a year after we came up here, the company was nice enough to let me know that they were going to be selling the business unit I worked for. And I didn't particularly like the idea of being sold, so they treated us really, really well financially. We were able to pretty much set ourselves up, and looked around and decided it would be fun to start a financial planning firm. I've always been good with the numbers, like the finances, and also helping people figure out where they want to go. So made a transition, started a financial planning firm. It's coming up on 10 years, and it's gone really well. Having a good time with that. So that's kind of the story. The other kind of strange thing about me is my other passion is I like to bass fish. I spent close to 15 years tournament bass fishing, so a little bit different there. Not a lot of guys that have advanced degrees in engineering the bass fish, but that is something I do like to do.
Thanks so much, Curt, for filling us in, man, on just kind of your story, where you've been. For your listeners out there, Curt, he mentioned about his bass fishing. Curt is the guy that Big A mentioned a few episodes ago, that he admitted that Curt was a better fisherman. So I know Big A also respects Curt quite a bit to say that out loud publicly. So
that's like one of my biggest accomplishments as far as to get him down. You got a guy south of the Mason-Dixon line comes up to Illinois, and he's throwing his jig from the one end of the boat, and I'm throwing the jig on the other end of the boat, and he's shaking his head after a couple hours, going, "This ain't right." As far as he was a little bewildered when I was doing that with it. So a little fun with him that day.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I know he respects you a ton, and he'll be looking forward to listening into this episode for sure. Curt, you and I both recently read The Bottom of the Pool by Andy Andrews, which is a fantastic book. It kind of basically focuses on thinking beyond boundaries to achieve extraordinary results. We read through that, and then we both jumped. I think maybe you mentioned to me the book or somebody. I can't remember how it happened, but we both actually jumped right into the 10X is Easier Than 2X book, which is a book by Hardy and Sullivan that just came out recently.
Right.
And I think going for both of us, going through that 10X book, so it's 10X is easier than 2X, and that's the fog that just keeps lifting, at least from my eyes,
right.
As we begin, not just to think differently about our objectives, our pursuits, and our goals, but I think, taking action on the concepts that we've been learning as well. What have you thought so far? Just, top level. We're going to dive into the 10X kind of thinking here, but just top level, what have you thought about kind of the bottom of the pool book, and then jumping right into the 10X book for yourself?
Yeah, the bottom of the pool book, as far as the one that stood out to me, was the concept. I'm not sure I'll get the quote right. It was something to the effect of the degree to which you will be compensated is inexorably linked to the degree to which you demonstrate obvious greater value. Mm-hmm. So it was the obvious greater value and demonstrate obvious greater value. So what he was saying is, hey, it's incumbent upon all of us to deliver value, but you have to make sure the value is obvious. And to that, it has to connect with whoever you're working with. So that was the one takeaway I had from Andrews. Just he did the traveler's journey too, and just made you think. So that was the one there. As far as the 10X is easier than 2X, sometimes books don't necessarily show you a lot of new things, but they package them and combine them and structure them in a way that it just clicks. And so I think that's the big thing I'm taking from the 10X is easier than 2X is there's just a number of different concepts. Each one of the 6 chapters has a different concept. And it was interesting. I was on a plane. I went out to California last week to visit daughter-in-law and granddaughter. And I was taking notes on the things, rereading it. And for each of the chapters, there's a point he's making. I'm like, oh, I got to do this in my business. Oh, I got to do this in business. Oh, I got to do this in my business. So nothing super, super new, but some really powerful stuff and some very actionable concepts that he gives to us. So I was really pleased. The other thing that really stood out to me in the book, because I've read a couple of the Sullivan books, and if the guy ever hears me talk or hears this, he'll probably never talk to me. As far as I'm pretty sure Hardy's the brain behind the thing, not Sullivan.
I think so too.
As far as I did some research on him, and the dude's incredible. I picked up another one of his books about creating the future you now, and just his way of reshaping your mindset and making you think about your mindset is incredible. So he's working with Sullivan on the stuff, and Sullivan's got his coaching business, but it's a really neat book. Lots of stuff that's easily implemented, but stuff that you thought about before. So that's kind of high level where it went with me.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the Hardy kind of being the brain. Not that Sullivan's not a smart guy, but he's obviously a smart guy. Like strategic coach is a pretty big deal. Right. But Hardy just does a good job. If you actually reading the book is one thing. So I don't know, Curt, if you've done this, but I've listened to the book and then I got the hard copy as well, and I just go back and making notes. But in the audio version of the book, they actually do a Hardy. So Hardy reads the book, but he also has a podcast interview in between chapters on the audio version Dan Sullivan. And that's worth, the whatever it costs to get the audio version right there, just to listen through that. But Hardy does a really good job. I think the breakdown for me, even the beginning chapters, is he basically sets up the whole thing that we're going to talk about 10X. We're going to dive into what the thesis is and what that is, what that means, and what we're learning from that. But he used is the wrong word. He's leveraging Sullivan on the past couple of books that Hardy's written to 10X himself. Like literally, that's it. It's like if you just get that out of it, it's like, oh my gosh, like he's thinking differently. And I think, that's what we're going to talk about today, right? Is that there are some problems that I uncovered reading through this, and we're only going to cover the first 3 chapters today. So maybe we'll bring you back for the last half of the book, but and get through that together and talk through that. But just the first 3 chapters, I really uncovered some problems that I think really affect most of us and where we are. And maybe these will resonate with you guys as you're listening. So first one is it takes too much work. So it hurts my head to think and do whatever big is, right? Maybe we have a bad taste in our mouths because historically we've heard others talk about going big and it's all about money or houses or cars and planes, right? You've seen those ads on Facebook or whatever. Like it's always about more. That's one problem that I think that I uncover as I'm thinking through this. It's a way I'm thinking about that. It's hurts my head. It's a lot of work. I think another problem is that we spend 80% of our time in the weeds, choking out the 20% of the things that truly move the needle. And small thinking mires us in the weeds of too many things. And then I think a third problem that I uncovered that we're going to talk through today is that we think too small. We think about needs. We're really concerned about what other people think versus the wants and what we truly desire. And it restricts us. And we end up having a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. So we're going to break that down in our convo today. So Curt, your opinion, how would you answer what is 10X mindset? Like what is this about?
It's about doing less to do more. Is what I would say. 10X from a quantitative standpoint is pretty easy. Add a 0, 10X, no big deal. But 10X is literally going to another level. A lot of times when you talk about something having another order of magnitude, that means 10 times bigger. So you talk about an order of magnitude. So 10X is doing an order of magnitude bigger, doing it bigger. And so that's what I think of 10X is how can you do it bigger? Now, bigger can be in terms of time, it can be in terms of dollars. There's lots of different dimensions in it, but really 10X is about taking it to that another order of magnitude, which when you talk about an order of magnitude, it's different. You have to think differently to do an order of magnitude. It's just a totally different ballgame when you talk about that. It's going from, single A baseball to Major League Baseball, or going from your local community playhouse to being on Broadway. They're totally different. So you have to think differently, and there's certain things that have to happen.
There's a statement that I can't remember if this is in the book or I'm going to read a couple of things today, just because I've obviously we've done the research, we've read the material, I've done some research otherwise, so I don't want to miss or not give credit where it's due. This may be in the book. It's a statement that says around the question of what is 10X. You hit on a number of these things, but you can 10X the value and quality of your time, money, and relationships and purpose. That's really what 10X is all about. I think one of the myths that people have when they think about 10X, and I'll be frank, I did. When I first started thinking about 10X, what does everybody think about?
Money.
The revenue, money.
Yeah.
100%. It's like, well, and then there's this mindset we get because we have this, whatever it is. Some of us do, some of us don't probably, but it's like, well, if it's about the money, then I like money. We need money. But, if I can 2X money, oh my gosh, man, that's phenomenal. Like 2X money, who wouldn't want that? Like, why do I need to even think about 10X? And so that's a myth, I think. The interesting, I think of a 10X premise, maybe the wrong word, maybe the right word here, but going for 10X requires letting go of the 80% of your current life and going all in on the crucial 20% that is relevant and high impact. And we're going to break that down a little bit as we get going. I want to read a couple more things here because I think they set us up for the rest of the conversation. And that is, why 10X versus 2X. 2X is linear. So it continues growing. Just when you continue growing, it means more effort, right? So 2X is linear, just do more and requires more effort. You mentioned the word qualitative. So, but 2X thinking is quantitatively focused. So you're just doing more of what you're doing now without respect to quality, uniqueness, or transformation. And the idea of a 10X mindset is really nonlinear. So the idea that enormous growth does not require more effort, but better effort. So you mentioned the word qualitative. It's qualitatively focused. So it's when we elevate our vision and focus such that we're now transforming the value and impact of what we do increasingly for specific people. And that's interesting because I think that ties right back to the obvious greater value that you mentioned that we just kind of covered in a previous book that we both read together. So, Curt, you reading this book, you've been a W-2, you've been in management, high level management, and then you've also been now as an entrepreneur and a business owner. Like, who is 10X best suited to help from your perspective?
It's an interesting question. I think the easiest place to apply it is within the small business, the entrepreneurial space. So I think that's where it is. Which, interestingly, you look at the backgrounds of the authors at the back of the book sometimes, and it was interesting to see how Hardy positioned himself. Hardy positioned himself as an expert in entrepreneurial leadership and exponential growth. So those are the two things he said: entrepreneurial leadership and exponential growth. So I think it's easiest suited, not best, for the folks in the small businesses and the entrepreneurs. But if I look at the concepts, and if I actually had the courage, the willingness to take the risk in a W-2 environment, you could take these tools and blow the socks off of things. So it's really the easiest place. It's structured because he writes, and Sullivan writes for the entrepreneurs. It's using the language, using the examples. But there are things in a traditional W-2 Fortune 50 type company that you could absolutely positively apply. Although you'd be bucking the trend a little bit. You'd be having a little bit of fun with some of the managers, but that's not a bad thing either, as far as to help you stand out. When you stand out, you get noticed, and that can be good or bad in a W-2 environment.
Yeah, that was good. That was kind of my takeaway too. I think that from a business owner, entrepreneur perspective, I think we have the freedom as business owners and entrepreneurs, right, to implement the things that we need to change. And I think that's one of the challenges that mid-level type managers may have, is that may not have the authority to make a change. But I think just as you mentioned, like, be inspired to pursue a life that maybe you didn't know ever existed. So even if you're that listener today, don't be like, oh, this is for business owners only. It is for business owners. It's also for those people that maybe want to think beyond, right, beyond the box of that they're currently in.
It's interesting. I remember there were two pretty senior executives at Caterpillar that gave talks, and both of them, as I kind of think back on the talks, and it's been a while, but I'm 99.9% certain that if I were to go back and look at their talks, they would be espousing a lot of these principles. Both of them were very, 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 very intentional with their time. They were incredibly intentional with their time, which is one of the key things. But yeah,
that's cool. Yep. What was just about ready to dive in here. So, but we're setting this up so that everybody understands kind of the foundational of why we're attacking this the way we are. And so I'll share with you what my kind of like my hook moment, right? I don't know if you, when you read a book or a concept or idea, you mentioned that this particular book doesn't have necessarily 100 new concepts in it. And I agree with that. Matter of fact, if you look back at like the idea of 10X, I think Grant Cardone, which I actually don't appreciate him, his style of things, very rich guy. He's one of those, Facebook ad coming to you from my front of my house in my plane, and
stepping
onto the plane in front of the Maserati. Yeah. But anyway, he's obviously done well for himself, so I'm not taking that away from him. But I'm saying that that's kind of that thought I had when I started reading this. Was like, kind of that problem that I told you about in the very beginning, right? One of the problems that we have is that this is like too hard, preconceived notions. And so for me, the trigger point though, was if I'm shooting for 2X, I probably won't land much further than where I'm at now. And I'll exhaust enormous amounts of energy grinding inches forward because there's not enough distinction to force clarity in any direction. There's not enough difference to discern what among the many things I'm doing now is ultimately a waste. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like when I put that whole concept together, that was the trigger for me of like, okay, there's a possibility here. And that was like my willingness to enter into the fray, if you will. What was did you have a trigger moment? Because I'm sure it's the same for you. You're a thinker, you're an analyzer. And so what was the that trigger hook for you?
Yeah. It's kind of weird. There's not books trigger concepts for me. So it's not so much that I saw something in that, but it triggers something in my mind. So what triggered in me is I am not nearly as intentional as I need to be, as far as from a time standpoint. Just being intentional about things. So if you're going to go 10X, you have to go 10X. And there's just certain things you can do and certain things you can't do. So I can't do 73 things and go 10X. Like, well, yeah, you can. Well, no, you can't, because you only have so much time. So you have to be intentional with your time. Well, I can do it this way and that way. And well, no, I can't do it this way and that way. I got to do it one way with the process. So the thought is like, look, if you want to do this, but quit playing around. Get serious about it. Be intentional about this. Be serious about what you want. I mean, he talks about what you want as opposed to what you need. That was probably one of the things I struggled with a little bit. Early on in our marriage, I would like, hey, I need a new fishing pole. And Sonia's like, no, you want a new fishing pole. And I'm like, so
you're
I
looking
went
for her approval. Is what you're looking for.
I was looking for a lot of things I needed, and she kept saying, no, you want. And so I kind of got programmed to, well, what do I need? I really need this. But he talks in the book about what do you want? What do you want your relationships to look like? What do you want your time to look like? What do you want on things? So it's that intentionality about your wants that kind of jumps out. And so it's like, okay, what do I want? And that's going. I think he's got the 4 things that Sullivan talks about are purpose, relationships, time, and money. And so to me, the hook is, hey, get serious about these 4. Which it's kind of funny you mentioned that Hardy's leverage and Sullivan. Well, again, he already had these concepts in the previous books. They're just kind of repackaged them in a different way, and that's okay, because sometimes repackaging actually triggers a thought, and that's what you're trying to do with this. You're trying to trigger the thought and then trigger an action that you're gonna make progress with things.
Curt, I've had we're in a full disclosure, right? We're in a mastermind group together.
Yep.
And we meet weekly, have for numbers of years. And we went to a summit event in this past January.
Yep.
And the summit event was designed for, it wasn't with our mastermind group. It was a different concept. And what it was is we only invited, there was Big A and myself, and then we invited eight other guys that had to meet certain criteria.
Yep.
To come. And we came and we basically holed up in a pretty cool hotel conference room setting down in Franklin, Tennessee. We started Thursday afternoon and we ended Saturday at noon. It was essentially only 48 hours. But we took that time and we gave each guy like a good amount of time to do like a deep dive man in the middle, which is kind of putting you on the hot seat. And each guy was supposed to bring like, one main problem they're trying to solve. That was the premise for what we were doing that weekend. It was phenomenal, by the way. It was so cool. Like some of the things that came out of that were like life-changing, no like mic drop stuff, Like I remember a moment, I'm just going to say this, I can't say who it is, but I remember the moment where like somebody was like trying to figure out their schedule, like they're a big deal. Like they're on stages and I mean, they're making tons of money. They're on stages and but their family, like their family time with their family was super important to them, and it was getting washed away. And I remember like this was their biggest challenge they're trying to solve. And I remember spending like 45 minutes, whatever the time was on this challenge. Everybody kind of gave their opinion and thought in, and then somebody in the group goes, "Why don't you just rent a plane?" And it was like silence. It was like this crazy silence. It felt like forever, but it wasn't. It's like one of those mic drop moments because this guy had a perspective that the other guy didn't have. And anyway, long story short, so it was great weekend. But you had a similar like mic drop moment coming out of that, and that feeds directly into these next three kind of topics we're going to talk about with the 10X mindset. We don't have a ton. I mean, obviously we got to be mindful of time today, but can you give us the summary version of you going into that event, and then kind of how you've gotten from there to here?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I remember, and I'm sure it'd be fine. Patrick Lewis was there with me, and he looked across at me. I've been laying out this plan and how I'm going to do this and everything. I said, you're going to fail. He said, you're not going to be able to pull this off. And that's the best thing to tell me, because I'm like, no, I ain't going to fail. As far as I'll succeed just to show you're wrong. But I didn't think about it until just now. This book, I've been trying to figure out what I need to do. So I'm trying to figure out how to grow the business. I'm putting stuff in place, but it just doesn't feel right. And so this book, actually, with the being intentional with the time and letting things go and actually giving some things up, was that's why I think it hit me, because I had the back in January, I had the problem. And that's one of the things about reading books and being involved with other men and doing stuff, is sometimes somebody says something to you that immediately, rent a plane. Great, problem solved. Sometimes somebody says something to you and you're like, hey, I respect you, Patrick. And you're not telling me that to be mean. You're telling me that because you know that if I keep going down the path I'm going down, it's not going to work. And so then that's been in the back of my mind, literally once a week, once every 2 weeks. I'm like, man, why do you say that? Why do you say that? Why do you say that? And so just going through this, I'm like, I got to let some stuff go. I just have to let some stuff go. I can't get there unless I'm there. And that's, don't want to go too esoteric, but I mean, the whole control thing and trying to be God and all that fun stuff kind of plays into this as well. So there's a whole spiritual aspect in this thing as well. I think Sullivan and Hardy are in a pretty good place there too.
Yeah. All right. So your foray into, you mentioned this word earlier about 10X growth being easier. And the first chapter of the book actually talks about the surprising simplicity of 10X growth. Do you agree that it's because here's the thing, like, we're not just looking at the book, and we've talked a lot about the book, obviously. It's the concepts in the book that we're diving into. And this isn't like a book review in the sense that here's what they say. This is reality. Like, we don't have time on this podcast episode, but like, there are time and time and time again, and moments and moments and moments of like going through this exercise of self-improvement over time, whether it's an event, whether it's the book, whatever it is, or other books, and you're taking action. So as you're taking action on the 10X mindset is easier than 2X, like that 10X mindset, why is it easier? How is it easier? Because that seems like a problem.
It's kind of a dichotomy. It's easier, but it's harder. So you're at a certain point in your business, and your business is going well, and your business is on good track, and you've got this 2X vision in front of you. And so you know what to do. And so it's easier to stay the course from the standpoint, it doesn't require any change. You don't have to overcome that you don't have to deal with yourself by just staying the course on that. But once you take the step to say, wait a minute, no, I don't want to do 2X, I want to do 10X. And you step back and you look at what it says is really easy. It's like, hey, stop doing things, really focus, do these things. So that is easier, but it's harder because you've got this fear going on. You're like, wait a minute. As I look through this, if you're successful in a certain area, you're like, hey, it's worked this way. So it's hard to break out of that, doing it that way, because it's gotten you success. So the 2X is quote unquote guaranteed. The 10X is like, well, I don't know, 10X is really big. I'm not sure I can pull that off. And it's going to require a lot more work, because 10 is bigger than 2, so it must require 5 times more work. But when you step back, it's like, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm going to be able to do the 2X, but to do that, I'm going to wear myself out. If I do the 10X, it says stop doing stuff. Well, that's a lot easier. So it's easier, but mentally, I think it's harder to take that step. That's why I think people struggle with the concept, because you tell somebody, well, 10X is easier than 2X. They're like, well, I can do math. It's 5 times harder. It's not easier. Like, no, that's quantitative thinking as opposed to qualitative thinking. That's, I think, at one point in time, I'm not sure it's in this book or one of Hardy's other books, he talks about Einsteinian time or Newtonian time, as far as, and he talks about, Newtonian time is the traditional physics we got. And Einstein did all this crazy relativity theory and stuff. And so he's like, time's a little bit different than we think of it. So it really is easier if you embrace it, but it's harder to embrace it.
I think the corollary, how do I can say this word right?
Corollary?
Yeah, I think the corollary is that 10x growth requires eliminating, you mentioned that we've got to do based on it being simple, right? It is simpler in the fact that if I back up and I think about my history of running a business, I think about even a view from the top where I'm at now, helping out there as an integrator and facilitator. It is so easy to think about setting the goal, setting the vision, the objective, pursuits, whatever you want to call it, at 2x. I'm going to double up. So I'm going to increase, or I'm going to increase 10%, right? I'm going to increase whatever it is. But it's a small amount because we can see the landscape of all the resources we have. And we can just say, okay, if we found something small that works, that moves the needle in some small way. And all we have to do is like double, triple, quadruple the efforts on that one thing that moves the needle a little bit. And that will help us get to double. And I've seen it because I've done this in the past where I'm reading this and I'm going, oh my gosh, like that was so hard. And I burnt people out because I like focus so much on like the 80% of things that were good. They get things done. They make progress. But the only thing you can do to move the needle is to do more of the thing you're doing. Versus, I think to your point, what's simpler about that 10X idea is in my mind, if I step back and say, okay, using his 80-20 rule, saying if I think about 20% of the things that actually move the needle in a really big way. I think there's an example in the book maybe that talks about, has the question, right? Maybe you can help me out with this. If we get so I can get this right. Kind of like casting a wider net versus like, honing in. If I can, would you rather, spend relationships with 100 clients to earn, $100? Or would you rather spend and build relationships with 10 clients, to make $1,000?
Yeah.
Right.
I think another example, and again, I'm not sure whether it was in this book or one of Hardy's other books, but I started, was Steve Jobs when he came back to Apple. Okay.
Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about it, what he actually did is he went from, I don't know how many products, they had like 200 different products, and he whittled it down to 4.
It was a lot. I mean,
yeah. Right. And so I was thinking about this as I was reading the book, and I'm like, I've never met Elon Musk or Zuckerberg or any of these dudes, and I don't aspire to be like them in many ways. Sure. And this could sound cocky or arrogant, but I don't think that they're like massive geniuses in some ways. As far as I don't think that they're like in this whole other level. I've been around people that are just blow you away smart, and I don't perceive they're the same kind of genius. But if I go back to Jobs, he said, "Hey guys, we got to do these 4 things really, really well," and he stopped doing everything else, and they blew up. I mean, that's easier as far as just to do the 4 things than to do the 200 products. But imagine going in and you've got all the charts in the thing, and it's like, well, product 1 sold this and 2 sold this, and they add up to this and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh yeah, that's great. Why don't we just get rid of 246 and keep 4 of the 250? I can just imagine the people in the room like, why do we bring the whack job back? I mean, this is crazy.
Is this why we let him go in the first place?
He was already thinking the 10X mindset. It's like, hey, yeah. So it's like I said, it is easier, but it's a mindset. It's those folks in the room. They're like, he's crazy, or Musk is crazy, or Zuckerberg is crazy. And okay, maybe in some ways they are, but when you look at what the potential is we have by changing our mindset and focusing in on certain things, you can do amazing things. It's just, I think we scare ourselves about that because 10X is kind of daunting when you think about it. 2X, Yeah, I can imagine. 10x, again, order of magnitude. It's a little scary.
Yep. Crazy people get crap done. That's what I say. So, but with 2x, everything seems
crazy
important.
people get crap done.
Yeah. With 2x, everything seems important. With 10x, there's only a few things that are important that actually makes 10x simpler to pursue. At the end of the day,
Yep.
I think that solves that problem of, 10x is too hard. It's not. It's hard. It's not too hard. The kind of moving through to kind of the next chapter, they talk about the quality, kind of 10xing the quality of everything that you do. That you use as an example of, I didn't know. Do you watch Mr. Beast at all? You watch his videos?
I've seen a couple of them just in passing.
Yeah,
as far as I don't watch them, but I have seen them because I heard about the guy. Insane,
crazy, legit, right? So anyway, Mr. Beast actually has a real name, and it's funny. His name is Jimmy Donaldson, I think. Jimmy Donaldson is Mr. Beast, which sounds completely opposites. But anyway, here's his online alter ego, right? But he does this really well. So he took the idea of like YouTube videos and entertainment and just totally like did it. I don't even think 10x. He did it like way better than everybody else. He created a category that really no one else had really created well before. And so he didn't do this by focusing on like creating a video a day that took him 5 minutes to produce. Right? He said, no, like the 10x thinking is I'm going to create one video a week or one video every other week that absolutely is crazy good and it's going to knock the socks off. I was talking to Nick Kennett, and he was in marketing and advertising, and then he and his wife started doing some traveling internationally. They took like a year off and did international travel. And he's been working at building up his YouTube channel. And he has just been going gangbusters these last 6 months because he figured that out as well. It wasn't about like creating a video that just does a little tiny thing and it's like did a really good one and really nailed it in. And I think it's interesting too, if you do many Google searches today for things, this is not the same idea. It is in principle, it's the same. So if you don't do a Google search on a topic or a question or whatever, it used to be years ago that you'd get a range of results that would come back, blog posts and whatever, right? Now you still get a lot of blog posts that come back, but they're super long. It used to be like you get a page that had just, 400 words on it. Now it's like, they're like books and they cover every single aspect about that topic. They 10x'd. They said, hey, I could write these little things, but if I go big, right, I can actually get some eyes. Right. And and so I think that 10xing the quality is just a really good concept idea. Have you had or saw other companies or in your own company, have you been thinking about or have you done any of this already in terms of the quality aspect of a 10x mindset?
Yeah, that's one of the main things we're focusing on is the process. I think that quality comes from process. Going back to my industrial engineering training, as far as you're not going to get quality unless you get a really good, stable, solid process. So I would argue that it's not just quality, but it's actually more about having just incredible processes. So whether it's how you check out at the store or how you onboard somebody or how you do paperwork or how you do a video, it's a process. So that's where there's so much cost by doing things poorly, and there's cost in time and effort and quality. So to me, when I looked at this chapter was kind of a call to say, hey, first one is focus in on what you're doing. The second one is define those 4 or 5 things you're doing and nail the process. I mean, just make sure that process is world class and there's minimal breaks in it. And when there are variants in it, you know how to handle those variants. And so just really, really, really nail it, because if you're going to go 10x, you can't afford to dilly-dally around. You have to make sure you can do it. Boom, 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 boom. It's got to be high quality. It's got to be a good, solid process. So that was a takeaway for me on the second chapter was quality equals process. What are the key processes for those key areas you're going on in the first chapter you're going through?
So I know as a financial advisor, Curt, that you've part of when you started your financial services firm, one of the things that you did was actually focused on entrepreneurs, business owners when you started. I think that's evolved for you over time. But as you started that, you've had a lot of opportunities to talk to other business owners. Some of your clients I'm familiar with, thing from CNC manufacturing to excavating to so when you think of pick a couple examples of, not by name, but a couple industries or businesses where this idea of 10Xing the quality, you mentioned process for yourself, because a lot of what you do is a lot of businesses, but you specifically your product is very process driven. There's not much else to it. How you invest, how you communicate, when you think of other businesses, just pick a couple as examples that you're familiar with and be like, this is how they have, or this is how they need to, from your observation.
Yeah. The business owners that I see that are most successful are very strong-willed. So they have very strong opinions about it needs to be done this way. Okay. And so if I'm not saying that it's necessarily the best way, because sometimes I'll look at their stuff and I'll be like, I'll start to ask questions. I can tell I'm starting to get on the edge of saying the baby's ugly. So I back away real quick. Okay. Baby's not ugly. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to be careful there. But what I've seen is whether they're in excavating or whether they're in CNC machining or whether they're in software development, they all have said, this is what I do and this is how I do it. I think what's interesting is most of them are struggling to go to the 10X, because in order to go to the 10X, they've got to take that process, that way of doing it that's in their mind, and they've got to transfer it to someone else. And a lot of times, going all the way back to the E-Myth, the E-Myth is a classic. You got the pie maker, he or she is the next pie maker. And so they just know how to make the pies. And so they have taken their businesses to the point where they have defined a process and they've said, this is the way it's got to be done. But now they've got to teach somebody else how to teach others to do it, because they're not going to be there if they want to be able to do something else. So the consistency I'm seeing in the folks is they have definite, you have to do it this way. Folks that do a little of this and a little of this and sometimes this way and sometimes that way, it just doesn't work. Yeah. And the other thing, do you guys have McAllowitz on one of your? Yeah. So, the other thing, there's always some sort of variant of profit first, whether it's an explicit profit first or just some sort of understanding of the operating capital. The rule I've kind of seen informally emerge is if you take the operating costs, kind of the payroll and the rent and everything like that, forget about the cost of goods sold. But the informal rule that I've kind of seen is you better have 2 months of operating costs in the bank. Otherwise, you're running yourself a risk. And that's because of the things. The cost of goods sold, you can deal with terms and everything like that. That's a different thing. But most of these guys all have the 2 months of operating things. So you do see some similarities. I think that you asked earlier, who is this book for? Well, it's for those folks that have taken their business and gone to a certain point. Now they're trying to figure out how to go 10X. And so I do think that they will benefit from it. And that's what I'm seeing on this one.
That's good. That's good. I like the thought that, I think to kind of wrap this section up, just to go 10X, we do radically fewer things, but we do them better.
Yep.
It's good. Have there been any 10X moments in your life up till now? I mean, maybe you didn't know how to label them. Maybe you did. But I'll answer first, and then I'll let you answer, because I didn't give you time on this question, I don't think. So
yep.
Something that's not business related at all that I recognize reading this book that I have 10X'd, having a mindset of 10X. Okay, so we're going to talk in a little bit about value and freedom and how that plays into needs and wants. Curt talked about that a bit earlier. So this is a precursor going into this. So I didn't know how to put these parts together. But what I did know is that like what I ended up as I'm reading this thinking, oh my goodness, like that's why I did that. That's what I valued. And that is, we did this pool project at our house. And I had somebody else actually put the pool in, do the concrete and all that. But all the landscaping around it, I wanted to do. And I did like design, and I'm not a designer. Like, I don't know what I was doing. The design, and I figured out the plants I wanted, went to the nursery, like did all the underlayment and the rock and the edging and planted everything. And I wanted it to be like amazing. And because I valued, at the end of the day, I knew I was going to value, I didn't know how to put words to this, but I figured out that I valued that effort that went into it, of the experience, the freedom I was going to feel being out by the pool in the environment. Sonia, my wife, said something to me. She said, after it was all done pretty much this summer, we were out there one day, sitting in the pool playing around. And she calls me Kevin because that's my name, my pseudo nickname.
I was told I couldn't
Wally,
call you
right?
Kevin. You're only Wally. Come on, man.
Wally. So that's it. So I love it. Wally. Last name's Wallenbeck. Wally, works out good. So anyway, maybe she said honey, I don't remember, but she's like, I really, really appreciate what you did here. Because I couldn't have seen that. Like for her, she didn't have the same vision, and she would have been happy just with the pool. She says, but now that I see it, now that I experience it, she said, I can't imagine what it would be like without it. And for me, that was a 10X moment, because the way I thought about what I didn't know, I didn't know what to do all that. I'd never done a landscaping project like that before. It's really cool when the landscaper shows up to do your irrigation, because I wasn't going to do irrigation. So I had him do irrigation. He shows up and he gets done, and we're standing there looking at it. And I was getting ready to write him a check for his work, and we're just jabbing. He goes, man, who did your landscaping? I did. He's like, no way. I'm like, yeah, man. He goes, he said, I couldn't tell. And that's not a brag on myself. And I'm not saying it that way. I'm saying my mindset to get it to there, right? 10Xing that quality, on trying to understand the freedom, the value. I didn't know. Now I'm learning of what that means. But have you had a moment, whether it's work or personal, where you've had a 10X moment?
Yeah, it was interesting when I read the book. It asked about this, and I was thinking about it a little bit. And I think I've had like many 10X moments. And I think a little bit of this goes to kind of how we're raised and everything. I was always like, yeah, you can do this. Yeah, you can do this. There was no, you can't do this. It was like, yeah, you're going to do this. So it's not failure wasn't an option. It was just kind of assumed. And so when I think about going to college, my parents didn't go to college. You're going to college, getting a PhD, becoming competitive as a bass fisherman, as far as just learning that, getting to a single digit golfer, build my own business. I mean, these are all things that it's interesting. I can see where they're 10X type moments, but I didn't think of them that way. Mm-hmm. But as I look at each of them, each of the things I go through, there was a certain set of habits that I did. And if I look at the habits and kind of the method that I got to each one of those, I'm like, wait a minute, the 6 chapters in this book kind of drill into that. So it's like, this was a framework that I could see, but I haven't ever used the framework overtly up front. But if I've seen it work, wait a minute, what happens if I actually overtly use the framework now to try and take something 10X? So that's kind of exciting to me. That's one of the reasons I'm really intrigued by this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because I mean, in the book, the very first opening introduction that Hardy talks about Michelangelo and uses him as an example of it, his very first, statue or painting that he did. The story's been incredible. Like he 10X'd from what he knew to what he didn't know. And then the next thing that he did, he 10X'd from that to that. So it's not like you show up and do 10X the same every time. It's the mindset. It's how we approach it. And I think that goes right into the last segment here. We're going to finish up here pretty quick. But this idea that 10X is about embracing an abundance mindset and rejecting scarcity.
Yep.
And this part, this is chapter 3, and this part of the book to me was probably one of the most impactful parts for me so far. as I've gotten into the book. And I have been guilty of I'll give you a great story. Like, I grew up very blue collar. And so growing up blue collar, I'm not saying that there's always a needs mindset in blue collar or always a wants, but my experience has been that growing up that way was very what was necessary and what was needs based. Just that the way of thinking. A lot of it was because of the resources that were available and whatnot. But I remember my mom saying to me when I started my business. So I went from W-2 and started my own business, had a young family. Youngest daughter was like 3, 4. And so I had 3 daughters and started my own business. And I remember her saying to me, this was the mindset. I love my mom. But this was her mindset. Her mindset was, Kevin Michael, that's my first and personal last name. She's like, Kevin Michael, I'm really scared that you're going to go start this business because you don't have health insurance. That was a needs-based mindset. And I've had to work over time. I don't have that all figured out yet. Right? I for sure don't. But for sure, I've been working and learning more about what I want. A need is typically something surrounded by what we think other people think. Versus our kind of what I want thinking is really, when we stop worrying about what other people are doing, saying, or not doing, we can then really begin to discover who we really are. And so I've been leaning into what do I really want and getting comfortable with it. And it's taking time. I'm still learning. And to do that, I've really had to dive into what was most important to me and what I valued to discover what I want and what I value. What's been your thought process or things you've worked through coming into that thinking abundantly versus scarcely?
I've never really had to struggle with the scarcity mindset. It's just something I've been blessed with, as far as I've always, I can do whatever I've set my mind to, as far as it's just been this belief set. So I mean, literally, I've been blessed with that mindset. I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Now, I don't always succeed in it, but I'm certainly going to give it a good try. And I'm not naive. I mean, there's certain things I'm not going to be able to do, but there's an awful lot of things I can do. So just it hasn't really been an issue for me with the scarcity versus abundance mindset. It actually drives me batty when I see people that are like, well, you can't do that, you can't do that. I'm like, well, why not? I mean, you see people doing stuff all the time. It's amazing to me what people are able to do. And I don't see us as that different. To me, everyone thinks the same way I do, because I've never been anybody else's mind. So everybody must be able to see the opportunities and everything. So that's just not been something that's ever really gotten in my way. Sometimes that can cause you to stretch a little bit too much, but it's one of the things that hasn't ever gotten in my way.
Hey, Curt, we're going to finish this up here just with kind of a closing. We've talked about these 3 things, and I want to make sure we just address them for everybody. There's so much more content, obviously, in the book, whether you listen or you read it. I encourage you guys to get it and start going through it and start applying some of these things and paying attention and how it changes the way that you're thinking. But so a couple things to consider as we close up here. One is, only a few things are important, and that makes 10X simpler to pursue. So remember, 10X is actually simpler than 2X. So it's that kind of inch deep versus mile wide, right? That net versus the arrow. So as leaders, don't hear me wrong though on this. We're still on mindset here. So don't jump ahead yet to execution, right? When you think about thinking of it being simpler. It's so easy to start thinking about all the things that it's going to take to do this. Don't go there yet, right? That comes after the thinking. So we need to put the energy into the thinking first, that this is easier. It's going to be simpler because we're going to focus on the 20% versus the 80%. I think another takeaway from this is focusing on mastery. The idea of doing a few things extremely well will be far more effective than doing many things well, kind of at a commonplace level. So as we talked about, to go 10X, we're going to do radically fewer things, but we're going to do them better. What did you take away from this?
Well, you laid in the first two. I think earlier you mentioned the third one, which is really critical. And we spent a little time talking about it, and that's the importance of embracing abundance versus scarcity. As far as there is more than enough to go around, and you just really need to embrace that abundance mindset as opposed to scarcity mindset. You want to be able to do the 10X growth, and kind of in conjunction with that, abundance versus scarcity. You really need to evaluate what you want versus what you need. What do you want? I want to achieve this in my life. I want to achieve that in life. I want to have this big accomplishment, as opposed to just what you need. Because once there's nothing wrong with talking about what you want. As far as we're put here to grow and do bigger things. So what are you put here for? What do you want is one of the big things I'd also do. Embrace abundancy versus scarcity, and focus on wants versus needs.
Nice. Okay, Curt, what's the last word?
Last word. Well, first, I want to say thank you for having me here to have a dialogue with you. I really appreciate it. I guess the word I'd leave for everybody here. I got to know Big A 8 or 9 years ago, and I was listening to him on podcasts, and he talked at that point in time about the importance of moving from success to significance. And he has taught me so much about the importance of building relationships. At one point in time, he called me out in front of a group, and I think he referred to me as the most relationally challenged person in the world, as far as pretty much called me inept in the area, which he wasn't far off. So what I would say is, with regards to that abundance versus scarcity and the ability to grow, I'd encourage everyone to pick up the book, take a look at it, and then more importantly than that, if you haven't already found your way to a group of folks that you can connect with on a regular basis that are equally enamored with the concept of abundance versus scarcity and really focusing on growth, find that group. If it's the View from the Top Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind group, that's great. If it's another group, a men's group, fine. If it's some guys you were in your fraternity with, that's fine. But don't be an island. As far as get out there with some other folks and do life with other folks. It makes it a lot better. And there's just so much more you can accomplish when you have other people around you. That's coming back to the book again here, as far as they're going to talk more as you read through the book about the importance of building that team and making sure you got other people around you. So don't try and do life alone. Make sure that you're with others, because when you're with others, you're making an impact on others. And that's what significance is. So that would be my last word.
I love it. Well, Curt, thank you so much for joining with me today. I don't know if I miss Big A that much, honestly. So I'll have to, he'll be listening and be like, what's going on? But it was great to sit and chat with you about what we're both learning and applying in our lives and our businesses and our marriages and our families. My best thought out of today is the idea of what got you here will keep you here. So no excuses, guys. Go get after it and do different. Go 10X. We'll see you next week.